Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AAS Publishing, and we're going to continue the series on the topical corridors in the journals. And we are very happy today to have with us Chris Lintott, who is both a lead editor of the Instrumentation software, Laboratory Astrophysics, and Data Corridor. And he also happens to have a second hat, which is of the editor of the RNAAS, Research Notes, of the AAS. So Chris, why don't you say hi, introduce yourself, and launch into a topic.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Lintott, as you've just heard. I think I have the most interesting job in the journals because I get papers that cover an enormous range of subjects. So the corridor name has 4 separate elements, but really I think it's sort of everything else that doesn't quite fit in other people's corridors. By background, I'm an astrochemist. That's what I did my PhD on, looking at the chemistry of star formation. And so Lab Astro is a great fit. Instrumentation and data, well, I've worked on big surveys for most of my career. And software is a particular interest of mine. I run a project called the Zooniverse, and run a software development team. So between all those things, I sort of wonder what my colleagues end up doing. I guess they get the papers too boring for my corridor. But it's a remarkable range of things. And I feel like when I sit down every morning with my cup of coffee to look at the new papers that have come in, I learn something every day.
So Chris, I'm curious, what was the title of your thesis?
The chemistry of young stellar objects. So the bit I'm proudest of, and in fact the only bit of my thesis that I know isn't wrong, or at least the only bit that hasn't yet been disproved, was I did sulfur chemistry around massive stars in the early universe.
Oh, very cool.
And I'm particularly excited because I think I've just found a way to test those ideas. So it may be that by this time next year, my whole thesis will have been proved wrong.
Awesome. Wonder if JWST or something like that could interrogate.
Yeah, no. So it turns out you can now test this with modern radio telescopes. I sort of got distracted. I moved into galaxies and other things, but I came back to it the last summer and spent some time thinking about it, which was fun.
Very cool. Research notes. You're also heading that up. How's that?
That's true. Yeah, Research Notes is an experiment. It's one that's been running for about 3 years now. It's a new kind of publication, both for the AAS and sort of for the world. So these are short papers. They're a couple of pages. They typically about 1,000 words with 1 figure or table. And they're not peer-reviewed. They're read by me and occasionally by other editors when we get things that I need help on. And they're intended to be a catch-all for things, the papers you never got round to writing. So they're a good place to abandon data. They're a good place to report negative results. We get a lot of updates. Sort of in 1983, I said this about this star, and now I've got the Gaia data. I can tell you that I was right or wrong. We publish methodological notes, and recently we started to see a lot of student projects. So when people are doing REU events as undergrads, or even school kids who have taken part in some research, we often say we're going to turn that into a full-scale paper, but people are busy and that's difficult. So pretty much anyone can write a 2-page note. We're even seeing some submissions from citizen scientists, from people who don't get paid to do this, which are great fun. And so notes is a joy. I get about 1 or 2 of those a day. And so literally the first thing I do in the morning is read 2 pages of somebody's research. And it could be about some of the interstellar objects that have been flying through the solar system. It could be about a solar flare. It could be a rather specific advice on how astronomers should deal with statistics. So it is a broad range.
So they're moderated, but they're not reviewed. But they still get a DOI, right? They're still searchable by ADS and all that.
Yeah, so they appear on ADS. That's the important thing, I think. That's where astronomers go to get their papers. So it is part of the research record. And one of the surprises with Research Notes, so Research Notes was, when we set it up, we very deliberately said that we weren't going to worry about whether something was notable. We care whether stuff is plausible, But you know, if you want to write a research note that says that a particular 12th magnitude star is a particular spectral type, and you give us the spectrum, that's cool. You can do whatever you like. And so most of them, therefore, I sort of expected to fall on stony ground. They might be important to the author, or at least worth putting in the record, because you never know what might be useful in the long run. But I didn't expect most of them to be useful. But more than a third of the research notes have already been cited in the mainstream literature. So I think they are being used, they are being read as well. There are a cohort of people who I think are kind of fans of research notes and read them. So they are consumed, but they're also being cited and included in the regular literature. So that's really exciting. That shows that they are making a difference.
Oh yeah, I think it's a great experiment. I do have a question. Do research notes ever get, in some sense, rejected? I understand it's not, peer review, but do some ever just not make it through? Or
yeah,
I think 100%.
The acceptance rate is high. It's north of 80%, I would say, for sure. But we do reject them. We mostly reject. We do get papers that suggest entire new theories of cosmology, for example, and those things need peer review. You're not going to advance your theory very much by going back and forth with me with 30 rounds of emails, and frankly, it's not going to improve my life too. So those get rejected. And while we allow comments, we also reject people for advertising. So we do occasionally get a research note that's usually from, I have to say, from more senior colleagues that say, my paper in 1973 was world-shattering and is being completely ignored. So let me tell you about it again, in case you didn't hear me the first time. So those get rejected. And then we're not fans of what I call flag planting. So if sometimes there is a result that's kind of obvious, that's being discussed in the literature and in the community. So and sometimes people try and do an end run and put a very quick note out to claim something. So for example, claiming that as people were observing Comet Borisov, the interstellar comet that came through, like, we know it's interstellar, everyone's talking about that, it's in ATL. We don't want a research note that just says the obvious. So we'll reject those too. But apart from that, people play very nicely, and most of the stuff is sort of fascinating and interesting.
So I'm curious, have you published a research note yourself?
I have. I've published a few. We've published a extrasolar planet observation that we made, where my favourite, we published a negative result, because one of the problems with the scientific literature is that we never really get negative results out there. So we didn't find a planet around Tau Ceti, so we published that, which was fun. So yeah, so that they are useful. I'm looking forward to. I've got students who are going to be working with me over the summer, and they have as one of the goals of their summer project will be to publish a research note, or at least to submit research note.
Right. I think that's a great venue. When I get out and I talk about the journals to graduate students at various seminars or something, I will always pitch research notes as a great entry.
Yeah, and I think it can be guilt relieving as well. One of the things I do, as well as the journals, is I'm involved in helping run a series of astronomy conferences called Dot Astronomy, which are sort of very broad astronomy on the web, software, outreach, all of those topics. And they've been going for more than a decade now. But the second ever Dot Astro conference, during the Hack Day period where people create creative responses to ideas, everyone got obsessed with the idea of needing a repository for abandoning observations gracefully. So the idea was that lots of us had data that we'd taken, that we'd worked on, that maybe turned out not to be useful for its particular purpose, or maybe you were looking for supernovae and you didn't find any, but there were still nice images of galaxies in there that might be of use to somebody, or maybe you want to prevent other people going down the same route. And we got halfway. All Hack Day projects get 80% of the way to being complete. And at this Dot Astro, after a day of effort with about 30 people, we got 80% of the way to having a repository that people could abandon their data in. But research notes serves the same purpose. If you want to say, I tried this, it didn't work, we can do that. you want to say, I tried this and I found this and I don't know what it is, you can do that. And I think that's really, really something that's been missing from our ability to talk to each other as a community.
So I'm going to go slightly nonlinear here. I'm going to go backwards and forwards. So I asked you if you've published research notes, and I myself have not yet. I have 2 that I am considering. So I'm still a wannabe research note author, but you may see something soon. So then going forward, and just to make this somewhat topical, given the current epoch we're in, do you think that dot astronomy will go this year? Are you going to try and virtualize it, or is it a TBD?
Well, we're feeling rather prescient in not great ways. So we're running 2 dot astronomy events this year, or at least we're hoping to. So one of them was a standard in-person conference in Madrid, hosted by the European Space Agency. That's still, in theory, on in September, and people can register. But we decided way before anyone in astronomy knew what a coronavirus was. We decided we were going to run a purely virtual event as well. So this summer, in August, we will run 3 days of a completely virtual conference. And the logic, I think, which has been proved to lots of us in the last couple of weeks, is that it is possible to have good meetings and to run good conferences online, but you don't do it by replicating the format of a conference that works in person. Like, online messaging and communication is very different. And so we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about what an online conference should be, and we'll be inviting people to come and take part in that over the summer. One of the things we're going to do, for example, is have, I think we've all had, particularly in the last couple of weeks, that there's something slightly bizarre about giving a lecture one way through Skype and not getting anything back from your audience. It's a very difficult thing to do. So for invited speakers or people that we end up giving main talks at the conference, we will pay for video editing. So you record the talk in advance and we'll get somebody to edit the video for you. So, because that's the correct way to communicate online. And then we'll all watch it together and the speaker can answer questions as we go and as we watch the pre-recorded video. So that's an example of the kind of way I think we can play with online formats that hopefully will provide a guide for other people.
I like that. I like that.
Well, you're a fan of online video, so.
Yeah, I have 1 or 2, but I don't do much post-production on it because single shot, like right here.
You've got a nice background, you know. I assume that's a Zoom background rather than an actual fence, but
it's actually a set of blinds. So I have
there you go.
Blue blinds. So yeah, somebody said I look like Max Headroom or something at some point.
That's a compliment, I think.
So what is the technology you're going to use for this virtual meeting? Are you really going to use Skype, or are you going to go with Zoom, or do you have something else in mind?
So we're still working that out, and if Slack or Google or Facebook or Zoom want to sponsor us, then they can email us at info@astronomy.com.
I will put that down in the link.
Great. Yeah.
YouTube, check this out.
I mean, I feel like at the minute we're all having a crash course in every app going to try and find the best way to communicate. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks.
Interesting. Very good. Let's see. Anything else you want to say at this point?
Well, we didn't really talk about going back to the main journals. I think, I think one of the things that I try and say whenever I talk about the journals is that a lot of the papers in my corridor are things that you wouldn't necessarily think or expect to find in the Astrophysical Journal or the Astronomical Journal. So papers about instrumentation or papers about software or data papers. Those are all really important parts of documenting our science. And so I usually tell people if they think they might want to write a paper that they should ping us. There's been a tradition, I think, you go back 30 years, or even 20, there's a tradition of that stuff not sullying the pages of the journal. But we're in a different world now. Yeah. The journal no longer has pages, for starters, so there's less problem with space. And so I think we can use that to properly document and give credit for a lot of the work that the people who build the instruments and the software that we all depend on need.
We'll certainly not get any argument from me on software tools.
No, well, indeed.
I think it's fantastic. And I'm glad that the journals now have a policy in place to deal with that. And in fact, we have various partnerships with software journals.
Yes, you can get your software reviewed as well. So we'll review the paper, but JOSS, the Journal of Open Source Software, will review the software for you, which is good. I mean, it's a world difference from when I started as an editor. The only software policy I could find was set in the 60s and said that software was inappropriate for the journals, and that one could print the code in an appendix if you wanted to.
Done it. That's how I originally did it. Was printing code in appendix. That's I've been there.
It always makes me think there was somebody when I was an undergrad in Cambridge. I remember talking to somebody who was finishing their thesis, and they'd done simulations of galaxy merging. But they weren't allowed to submit the video as part of their thesis because the thesis had to be printed and installed in the library. So they turned the whole thing into a flip book. So you could see their simulation by just flicking through the thesis, which is brilliant, but took forever to print because they now had a high resolution image on it.
800-page thesis or so to flip it.
That's right, yeah.
Very cool. Do you see any particular hot trends or topics that are going on within your corridor right now? Are there particular items of interest?
Yeah, well, it's so disparate that it's quite difficult to pick up trends. I think Lab Astro is really flying right now. So the community of people who run laboratory experiments on Earth to try and help us interpret observations of space, so the sort of real fundamentals of the subject, where people are predicting line lists and that sort of thing. There's a huge amount of effort going into that, partly inspired by things like ALMA, which are providing observational needs for that kind of theoretical work, but also because it's kind of fascinating chemistry to try and understand some of these things as well. So, and atomic physics too. So Lab Astro is growing year on year, and that's becoming a bigger part of what we do. So, in fact, Daniel Savin, who's our science editor for that, would insist that the name of the corridor is placed in what he considers its correct order. So it's Lab Astro, Software, Data and Instrumentation. Okay, Daniel. Do you use any of the other, who else do you use on the scientific editor side, just to give some shout outs? Well, I work a lot with pretty much everyone actually, because when I get instrumentation papers, I have to pass over, but I get a lot of stuff from Michael Endel and Chris Consley, so galaxies and exoplanets. Lots of those papers are software heavy or machine learning heavy. Actually, that's another trend that's definitely happening, is people are very into their machine learning these days. Excuse me. Indeed. Cool. Well, it's nice to talk to you. I'm glad all's well. Well, I'm glad we talked. I'm glad to see you're cheerful as ever. Yeah, no, it's good. It's sunny outside, so that's made this week better. So yeah, it's also 5:30 on a Friday, so that's the end of the week for me. Ah, very good, very good. All right, I guess that'll wrap it up. Chris, thanks so much for chatting with me today, and everyone, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll put some links down below, and we'll see you on the next one. Cool, my pleasure. Take care, Frank.